There are job listings that make you pause, not because they offer something suspicious, but because they offer something impossible. $95 per hour. Housing included. No experience necessary. Located deep within the Everglades National Park. I stared at the screen in disbelief, refreshing the page twice to make sure it was not a glitch. I had been job hunting for 4 months. I had degrees, but no job. A bank account with less than $500. A fridge that only hummed because it had nothing to cool. The listing arrived in the middle of the night, 3:17 a.m. to be exact. It came without a sender name, just a subject line that read, "Urgent opening, tour guide needed." I applied. 3 minutes later, the job was mine. A bus ticket was already booked. No interviews. No references. Just a note, "Arrive tomorrow. Someone will meet you." I wish I had never opened that email. My name is Elias Carter. I am 25 years old. 2 months ago, I accepted a job that I now believe I was never meant to survive. Before everything went wrong, I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, in an upstairs unit above a 24-hour laundromat that rattled every night like a steel heartbeat. I had earned a degree in environmental biology, top 10% of my class. The world, however, did not care. I applied to over 100 jobs. I received 0 offers. I had done everything right: internships, certifications, volunteer work. Still, I had nothing. My apartment was nearly empty. My power bill was overdue. I had 6 boxes of dry ramen, $3 in change, and one last sliver of hope that something would break my way. Then came the email. It was 3:17 in the morning. I had been up all night scrolling through job boards like a gambler pulling the same broken slot machine. The email subject line glowed on my screen in silence. "Urgent opening, Everglades tour guide, immediate start." The body of the message was short. No sender name. No company logo. Just this. $95 per hour. Housing provided. No experience required. Immediate start. Bus ticket attached. Report to North River Station. Someone will meet you. Most people would have deleted it, maybe even laughed. But desperation does not think rationally. Desperation is hungry, and that night, it devoured all my common sense. I clicked apply. It did not even ask for a resume, just a confirmation. 3 minutes later, I received a return message. Job confirmed. Your bus departs this evening. Do not be late. I packed everything I owned into a single duffel bag. A pair of hiking boots, 2 water bottles, some dried trail snacks, and a lightweight rain jacket. I left my apartment key on the kitchen counter and locked the door behind me. I did not say goodbye to anyone. The Greyhound station smelled like disinfectant and stale popcorn. I boarded quietly, choosing a window seat in the back. For the next 18 hours, I sat with my head against the glass, watching the country flatten and darken and then turn green with water. Southern Florida crept into view like a memory I had never lived. The cities vanished. Trees rose taller. Roads narrowed. Swamps grew thicker. Gas stations disappeared. Birds circled overhead like they were tracking us. I tried to sleep but could not. I kept looking at the email. I kept reading the words again and again. No experience required. $95 per hour. It sounded wrong. Too good. Too unreal. But every time I tried to talk myself out of it, I remembered my bank balance and how long I had gone without a meal that did not come from a microwave. The bus made fewer and fewer stops. Eventually, it turned down a 1-lane highway that sliced through a flooded forest. Cypress trees loomed outside the windows like sentries. The only other passengers were silent now, asleep or pretending to be. I stared at the reflection of my own face until the driver called out in a tired voice, "North River Station." There was no station, only a wooden bench, a single crooked street lamp, a leaning gas station with a broken neon sign that read M_ in flickering red. The bus hissed and groaned as it came to a full stop. I stepped off, the humidity pressing down on me like a soaked blanket. The air smelled like brackish water and earth. I looked back at the driver, but he did not meet my eyes. The door closed behind me, and the bus pulled away, leaving only exhaust and silence in its wake. The gas station door creaked open on rusted hinges. Inside, the lights buzzed overhead in dull yellow streaks. A refrigerator hummed in the corner, its glass fogged. Behind the counter sat an old man, hunched over a crossword puzzle. His hair was white, not from age alone but from something heavier, like he had seen things that bleached him from the inside out. His name tag read August. Barely. Most of the letters were worn down to shadows. He looked up without surprise. "You are the new guide." His voice was dry, cracked like the skin on his hands. He did not smile. He did not introduce himself. He simply turned, pulled a plastic water bottle from the cooler, and placed it on the counter in front of me. 2 miles that way, he said, pointing toward a dirt trail lined with palmetto fronds. "Follow it until you reach the dock. Captain Barrett is waiting. He will give you the rest." I stood there for a moment, unsure if I was supposed to respond. He spoke again, slower. "You listen to him. And you follow the rules. All of them. No matter how strange they sound." My throat was dry. I nodded, took the bottle. My fingers brushed against his for the briefest second. His skin was cold. Not cool, cold like river stone. Outside, the sky was beginning to dim. Not yet sunset, but close. The clouds had thickened without warning. The trail ahead looked like it had not been walked in years. Palmetto bushes crowded the sides, and cypress roots twisted up through the dirt like knuckles. The air was alive with sound. Cicadas screamed from the branches. Birds called to each other in uneven intervals. Somewhere in the distance, something large splashed. I walked. The further I went, the heavier the air became. My shirt clung to my back. My breath felt hot in my lungs. I passed a tree with carvings in the bark. Names, maybe. Dozens of them. Some fresh. Some faded. The dock appeared just as the path curved around a fallen tree. It was longer than I expected. Wooden planks, warped from time and moisture, stretched out over the water. Several airboats were moored at the far end. One of them gleamed newer than the rest. At the end of the dock stood a man with a cigarette. He was tall, lean, wearing a hat pulled low against the sun. His arms were crossed. He did not wave. "You are early," he said when I reached him. His voice was deep, gravelly. "Good. That means you might listen." Barrett's eyes flicked over me, sharp and steady like a hawk sizing up prey. "Listen close. The rules here aren't just suggestions. They're what keep you alive." He lit his cigarette, the ember glowing red in the dusk. Rule 1. Never wander alone after dark. The Everglades don't like company, but they hate trespassers more. He tapped ash into the water, then continued, "Rule 2. Don't touch anything you don't recognize. Plants, animals. Some things out here can kill you quicker than a snake bite. Rule 3. If you hear the water calling, don't answer. That's not just the wind. It's something else, something hungry." I nodded, the weight of his words settling deep. The trailer they'd assigned me was a faded relic perched on stilts at the edge of the swamp. Inside, the air was thick and warm, smelling faintly of mold and old wood. The fan overhead spun lazily, barely stirring the humid stillness. That night, sleep was elusive. The sounds outside were a chorus of the wild. Frogs croaking, insects buzzing, the distant splash of something too big to identify. Shadows shifted beyond the cracked windows, and my mind twisted every noise into a threat. Morning came with no relief, just a low, heavy light filtering through the trees. Barrett was already waiting by the airboat, cigarette still smoldering. "Time to see the Everglades," he said. The boat roared to life, cutting through the mirrored water like a knife. Cypress knees jutted up on either side, ghostly fingers reaching from the swamp. Birds scattered at our approach, startled into flight. As we moved deeper, Barrett spoke less. The weight of the place pressed down harder. I understood why the rules existed, why August's warning was urgent. This wasn't just a tour. It was a passage. The boat slowed near a cluster of mangroves where the water grew thick and dark. Barrett killed the engine, and silence fell like a weight. "This is where most folks start to feel it," he said, eyes scanning the shadows. "The swamp doesn't just sit here waiting. It watches. It listens." I spotted the others then, Three passengers huddled together on the boat bench. A young woman clutching a camera, her hands shaking. A man in a fishing hat staring at the water like he was trying to see beneath its surface. And a quiet kid who kept glancing nervously at the trees. "Everyone thinks they're here for an adventure," Barrett said, lighting another cigarette. "But the Everglades, she's not interested in your stories. Only in what you bring." A sudden splash echoed behind us. The passengers flinched, eyes darting around. "Cayman," Barrett murmured. "But not the kind you're thinking." The water rippled again, slower this time, like something watching, weighing whether we belonged. I swallowed hard. The stories I'd heard back home flooded my mind. Disappearances, strange lights, whispers carried on the swamp wind. Barrett's voice broke through. "Stick to the rules. Stay close. And for God's sake, don't answer the water." The tour pressed on, but my eyes never stopped scanning the dark edges, the hidden depths. This place was alive in ways I couldn't yet understand. And something about it was calling me. The boat drifted silently under a canopy of cypress knees, their twisted roots clawing through the water like ancient hands. The swamp seemed to breathe around us, a slow, rhythmic pulse that settled in my chest. Suddenly, Barrett's hand shot up, sharp and urgent. "Hold up." He pointed toward the water's edge, where a faint flicker of movement barely disturbed the stillness. A pair of eyes reflected in the shadows, too low and too close to be a deer. "Gators," Barrett said, voice low. "But these aren't the ones you worry about." The passengers froze, faces pale in the dim light. One of the eyes blinked, then vanished beneath the surface. Barrett turned to me. "Your first test." My heart thudded hard against my ribs. "Step off the boat. Walk the bank to that old hollow tree," he said, pointing toward a dark shape nestled among the roots. "Pick up the bundle tied there." "Why me?" I asked, voice barely steady. "Because you're here now. And because guides don't get to be scared." The air tightened as I climbed down the side of the boat and onto the soggy bank. The ground was soft and cold beneath my boots, and every step felt like sinking deeper into the swamp's secrets. The hollow tree loomed ahead, gnarled and blackened with age. The bundle was tied with fraying rope, a thick coil of old rope, a small tin box, and a faded photograph of a man I didn't recognize. I grabbed it and turned back. Back on the boat, Barrett nodded approvingly. "But now you understand. This place holds its history close. Sometimes you carry it for a while." Later that evening, in the dim light of the gas station, August waited. His eyes, ice cold and unreadable, locked onto mine. "You did well," he said softly. "But the swamp never lets you go that easy." I wanted to ask him what he meant, but the silence stretched long, and the weight of the night pressed down. That night, back in the trailer, I sat on the creaky cot and untied the bundle. The rope was rough against my fingers, fraying like the edges of my nerves. Inside was the tin box, rusted and dented. I pried it open with trembling hands. Inside, there were several items: a small, faded notebook, a silver key the size of my thumb, and a carved wooden token shaped like a gator's tooth. I flipped through the notebook. The pages were filled with jagged handwriting, strange symbols, and scattered notes about tides, weather patterns, and something called the Watchers. The last entry was dated 5 years ago. It ended abruptly. "They come with the fog. The water sings their names. Never look into the black." The weight of it pressed on me. Later, I found August sitting outside the gas station, staring at the flickering neon sign like it held answers. His cold skin was almost glowing in the damp night air. I sat beside him. "What are the Watchers?" He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, in a voice like cracking ice, he said, "They're not people. Not anymore. They're what's left when the swamp takes more than it gives." I shivered, not just from the humidity. Every guide before you carried something. Every one of them. It's the price of survival. His eyes locked with mine. You have to decide what you're willing to carry. The morning sun cut weakly through the mist as I stepped outside the trailer. The swamp seemed quieter now, but the silence was heavier, like the calm before a storm. At the gas station, Barrett was already waiting by the boat, his cigarette stubbed out. He looked different in the daylight, less a shadow and more a hard edge carved by years in the wild. "You look like hell," he said without a smile. "Could say the same," I muttered, clutching the bundle. Barrett's eyes flicked to it, then back to mine. "That's your burden now. Don't let it weigh you down too much." As we pushed off into the swamp again, the boat sliced through a layer of low-hanging fog. The trees emerged like ghostly sentinels, their reflections warping in the water. The passengers were quieter this time, their faces drawn tight with unease. The woman with the camera barely raised it, the man in the fishing hat stared at the sky, and the kid kept fidgeting with something in his pocket. Halfway through the tour, Barrett stopped the boat near a cluster of fallen trees submerged beneath the water. "Here," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "This is where it starts to change." He gestured toward the thick fog swirling over the water. The swamp doesn't just hide things. It changes them. People, creatures, memories. The water shimmered unnaturally, and I caught a glimpse of something moving just beneath the surface. Too slow, too deliberate to be a fish. A chill ran down my spine. Barrett looked at me. "Keep your eyes open. And remember, never answer the water." The water beneath the boat shimmered unnaturally, like liquid glass rippling with shadows that didn't belong. I leaned closer to the edge, heart pounding, and caught sight of something dark and massive, gliding slowly just beneath the surface. It wasn't a fish, nor any gator I'd ever seen. Its shape was too fluid, too vague, but the presence was undeniable. The passengers stiffened, sensing it too. The young woman's fingers tightened around her camera, the man's eyes narrowed, and the kid, who hadn't said a word yet, clutched a small talisman hanging from his neck. Barrett's voice cut through the silence, rough as gravel. "That's one of the things the swamp hides. Not all who live here are flesh and bone." The boat creaked as we drifted, the fog thickening like a living thing swallowing the world whole. I swallowed hard. "What is it?" Barrett didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the murky water, as if waiting for something to surface. The Everglades are older than this country, older than any man's memory. They're a place where time forgets itself. And sometimes it gives up pieces of its soul. The air grew heavier, the temperature dropping despite the humid morning. Then the water rippled violently. A splash echoed nearby. The boat rocked. Everyone jerked upright, eyes wide. "Stay calm," Barrett said, voice firm but urgent. "Whatever's out there, it's testing us." Suddenly, the kid gasped and pointed toward the water. From the depths, a hand emerged, pale, slick, and dripping with swamp muck. Then another. Claws, jagged and unnatural, scraped against the wood. The passengers scrambled, but Barrett raised a hand, stopping them. "Do not look away." I locked eyes on the pale figure as it pulled itself slowly onto a submerged log. A creature, part man, part something else. Moss clinging to its skin, eyes glowing faintly with an eerie green light. It looked directly at me. The air was thick with a silence so complete it roared in my ears. Then Barrett spoke softly, almost a prayer. "Welcome to the Everglades." As the creature slipped back beneath the water, the fog began to thin. The boat resumed its course, but the atmosphere was changed, heavier, charged with something unseen. The passengers whispered among themselves, fear and fascination mingling in their voices. I glanced down at the wooden token in my hand, the gator's tooth carving, feeling its weight for the first time as something more than a keepsake. Barrett broke the silence. "That creature is called a swamp warden. Some say they protect the Everglades, others say they're a curse. Either way, they watch." I swallowed hard. "Watch for what?" "The ones who forget the rules," Barrett said grimly. "And the ones who bring trouble." The rest of the tour passed in a tense blur. I found myself watching every shadow, every ripple in the water, trying to commit everything to memory. By the time we returned to the dock, the sun was dipping low, casting long, twisted shadows through the trees. August was waiting at the dock, his face unreadable. He looked at me, then at the bundle. "You saw the warden," he said quietly. I nodded. He leaned in closer. "They don't just watch. They remember. They keep score." A shiver ran through me. "Keep your wits about you," August warned. The swamp isn't done with you yet. That night, in the trailer, sleep felt like a fragile illusion. I pored over the notebook again, tracing the symbols and trying to understand. The last pages hinted at something called the Covenant, a pact between the guides and the swamp's darker inhabitants. It promised protection in exchange for obedience and sacrifices. My mind reeled. What had I agreed to? Morning came with new questions and an unsettling sense of being watched. The Everglades had welcomed me. Now, it wanted something in return. The next day began with a haze that felt thicker, almost suffocating. I stepped outside the trailer and felt the humid air wrap around me like a wet shroud. The swamp was waking, birds calling, insects buzzing, and beneath it all, that persistent, low thrum, like a heartbeat just beyond hearing. At the gas station, August was waiting, his eyes sharper than ever. "You look like you've seen ghosts." I showed him the notebook again, the pages dog-eared and worn from constant flipping. He sighed, voice heavy. "The covenant isn't just words. It's a bond. One you can't break without paying a price." "What kind of price?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached behind the counter and pulled out a small leather pouch, worn and cracked with age. "This," he said, handing it to me, "was left by the last guide who didn't keep his promise." I opened it carefully. Inside was a single withered leaf and a small bone carved into a spiral. "Symbols," August said quietly. "A warning." I shivered. What happened to him? August's gaze darkened. Gone. Lost to the swamp. Like so many before him. Barrett's voice broke into my spiraling thoughts that afternoon, when we met at the dock to begin another tour. "You have to accept something," he said bluntly. "The Everglades aren't a place you visit. They're a place that visits you, changes you, tests you." The boat slid through the water, the cypress knees reaching like skeletal hands beneath the surface. This time, the passengers were even quieter, and the tension between them was almost tangible. As we moved deeper, Barrett pointed to a cluster of moss-draped trees. "Here's where the old world and the new world meet," he said. "Where the swamp's memory is strongest." The water darkened and shimmered unnaturally, like a portal opening. Suddenly, a voice, soft, barely more than a whisper, floated over the water. "Welcome back." The woman with the camera gasped, clutching her chest. Barrett didn't flinch. "That's the swamp speaking. You don't answer." The silence broke only when the boat slowed to a stop near a small island of tangled roots and fallen branches. Barrett jumped off and motioned for us to follow. "This is the heart," he said, voice low, "where the covenant was forged." The island was thick with vines and shadows, and the air felt charged with something ancient. As I stepped forward, the wooden token in my pocket grew warm. Barrett turned, eyes piercing. "Remember, everything here has a price." Back on the boat, the tension finally cracked. The man in the fishing hat spoke for the first time, voice rough. "How do we know we're not just bait?" Barrett's grim smile was the only answer. The tour ended as night fell, the swamp swallowing us in darkness. But I knew this was only the beginning. The Everglades were watching, waiting, and I was already part of the covenant. Night settled over the swamp like a thick, wet blanket, muffling all sound except the occasional croak or splash. The trailer felt smaller somehow, the shadows deeper and darker inside. I sat on the edge of the cot, the notebook open on my lap, fingers tracing the cryptic symbols again and again. A sudden noise outside made me freeze, a soft rustling, like something brushing against the leaves. I held my breath, every nerve taut. After a long moment, nothing else came. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Morning brought no relief. The air outside shimmered with heat and humidity, and the swamp seemed to pulse with life just beyond the trees. At the gas station, August was waiting, his face unreadable. "You're thinking too much," he said, his voice low. "The swamp feeds on doubt." I looked at him, trying to find some anchor in his cold gaze. "Tonight," he added, "you'll see why." That evening, Barrett took me deeper into the Everglades than before. The boat slid silently through water so still it was like glass. The fog was thicker now, curling around the trees and the hull like fingers. We reached a narrow channel, barely wide enough for the airboat. The trees leaned inward, their branches entwining overhead to form a dark tunnel. "This is the Vale," Barrett said, his voice barely audible over the boat's engine. "It separates the living from the forgotten." I swallowed hard. As we entered, the temperature dropped sharply. The swamp's usual chorus faded into an eerie silence. Suddenly, shapes began to form in the fog, blurred figures drifting just beyond clear sight. "Ghosts," I whispered. Barrett shook his head. "Not ghosts. Memories. The Everglades keep everything. Pain, joy, fear, it's all here." One figure drifted closer, a woman in a tattered dress, her face obscured by moss. The passengers gasped. The kid shrank back, clutching his talisman. Barrett's voice cut through the tension. "Don't stare. Don't speak. Just move." We sped through the Vale, the figures dissolving as quickly as they appeared. Back on solid ground, I felt the weight of everything pressing down. The swamp was more than a place. It was a living, breathing entity that held secrets darker than the deepest waters. August met my eyes. "You're not just a guide. You're a keeper now." The words settled in my chest like a stone. The days that followed were a blur of tours, strange encounters, and growing unease. The passengers whispered of strange dreams, sudden chills, and feelings of being watched. One evening, the woman with the camera approached me, voice trembling. "Have you seen the lights? Flickering in the trees at night?" I nodded. "I've heard about them. They say it's the swamp's way of calling." She shivered. "Calling who?" I didn't have an answer. As my time in the Everglades stretched on, I felt the swamp's grip tighten. The covenant was no longer just words in a notebook, it was a chain wrapped around my soul. And the Everglades were waiting for me to make a choice. The night was thick with mist, heavier than I had ever felt before. It clung to my skin, seeped into my bones, and whispered in voices just beyond hearing. The Everglades had become a place both terrifying and familiar, a shadow world where time unraveled and secrets festered beneath the surface. August's warning echoed in my mind. "You have to decide what you're willing to carry." I stood at the edge of the swamp, the wooden token warm in my palm. The silver key from the bundle caught the moonlight, glinting like a promise or a curse. Barrett was already there, waiting silently by the water. His face was unreadable, carved by years of hardship and the weight of the swamp's endless watch. "This is it," he said. "The choice you never thought you'd have to make." I looked out over the dark water, where faint ripples disturbed the reflection of the stars. "You don't have to be the next guide," Barrett continued. "You can leave. Walk away. But the swamp, it never forgets those who take its gifts and run." A cold wind swept through the trees. From the shadows emerged shapes, those spectral memories from the Vale, swirling around like lost souls seeking redemption or revenge. August appeared beside me, his eyes like shards of ice. "The covenant binds you now. To break it, you must offer something of equal weight." I thought of the lives I'd glimpsed here, the guides who had vanished, the strange creatures lurking beneath the water, the silent promise of the swamp's eternal gaze. My breath caught. "I'm ready," I said, voice steady. Barrett nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Then come." We moved deeper into the swamp, toward an ancient tree whose roots twisted like veins into the water. August handed me the key. "Unlock the past." With trembling fingers, I slid the key into a hollow in the bark. The wood groaned, splitting open to reveal a small, hidden chamber glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Inside lay relics, artifacts from every guide before me, memories etched into objects of power and sacrifice. I placed the wooden token inside, and the chamber pulsed with light. A voice rose, barely more than a breath, yet filled with the weight of centuries. "You have accepted the burden." The swamp seemed to sigh, the air thickening, then clearing. I felt the weight lift, then settle in a new place, deeper inside me. I was no longer just a visitor. I was a keeper of the Everglades. As dawn broke, the mist lifted and the swamp returned to its slow, endless rhythm. The tourists would come again, and guides would be needed. But now I understood. The Everglades were not a place to escape. They were a place to belong.